but it's not like I'm just going to write like a 20-page treatise or something like that on, you know, I don't know, the state of Wild Rift or something like that. It's like it's got to be short, it's got to be high value, and it's got to be succinct, and it's got to fit in with the messaging and stuff like that. I don't know. There's a lot of complexity to doing things in an official way. And again, I think we should do more balanced messaging in an official way. And that's something I've spent a little bit of time talking with Alice about, the one of the comms people at Riot who does a lot of the work on the patch notes. Um, but the truth here is that it's just a complicated question. Ideally, yes, this would be translated into more languages, but it is not reasonable to ask the people, on their free time also to translate my, what is it at this point, over 3 hours at this point stream into, a billion languages. Um, anyway, for the people who are saying they appreciate me free time, like absolutely, like, and thank you so much for watching, right? It's like I wouldn't do this if no one was watching, right? It's like, I was doing this when I had 8 viewers, and I was happy with that. But yeah, for sure, everyone who comes by and asks questions and is respectful, like it's super awesome to have you here. Um, so, uh, can you implement dodging and remake system? No, that has nothing to do with my team. Sorry. So sometimes the chat bugs out and doesn't send until we restart the game. Any help? I can check if we have that bug logged, but I don't know anything about that. So let me write that down here in my notepad. I have a couple things to check on Monday, most of which are just bugs to see if we have them logged. But for the most part, I don't know. It's not like I have stuff. Thoughts on raising the cam height a bit? Having cam in the middle is better for mechanical play, but feels really restricted for vision, especially playing downwards. I agree. There are some downsides to the current placement of the camera, um, but how do I put this? Um, they cut like a lot of factors in the game, a lot of systemic factors in the game are kind of tuned around the camera height, including some ability ranges, and so it would be a really big deal to change camera height or camera like radius. So I think it's unlikely we really mess with the camera much, unfortunately. Because I kind of agree. I kind of wish the game was zoomed out slightly more. But uh, I don't know. It's not something that I feel super strongly about, but I do kind of wish it was a little bit further out. But yeah, like I said, we've balanced a lot of the systems around the current camera vision, so it's unlikely we make significant changes. Okay. What does your team specialize on? We are the systems and balance team. That's literally the name of my team. So we do the game systems and we do balance. Those are the things that we do. So items, runes, item reworks, new items, champion balance. We do not make the new champions. That's a different team called champs. But yeah, do you think the Kale nerf was too much, or she's in a good state? We have not checked. Or at least I personally have not checked back in with the data. We're gonna need to follow up and get some wait for some more time. Um, so I don't have any information on Kale right now. But what I talked about earlier is like we kind of intentionally went pretty hard for Kale, knowing that we might have over nerfed her, right? So it's definitely a possibility. Like we're prepared to say like maybe it was too much. So can you share Timo current state? Can you buff him? I talked a lot about Timo in the previous video I did. That shouldn't be too hard to find if you want to look in the previous video, but no, we're not going to buff Timo right now. Funny question, is there a champ whose player base is the most toxic / most often reported? This would be interesting data for us to get. I don't have it, but PC used to have this data. There used to be a sheet to get that data. In PC back in the day, the most toxic champion was Master Yi, but that was a long time ago, so it could easily be different now. But I would guess that I would guess that Master Yi is probably in the top 5 most toxic champions, would be my guess. Um, but yeah, I don't know. We don't have that data readily available. Why won't buff you Timo? There's a reason to buffing different. Again, I'm not going to get super in detail about this because we talked about I spent a lot of time talking about Timo a little bit in this stream and a lot previously. Is that Timo doesn't have significant MMR skew. He has a little bit, but it's not huge. We're not going to spend a lot of time buffing and nerfing Timo because our perspective is that Timo needs larger work to be successful. He is not as popular in Wild Rift as we think he should be. We believe that is probably due to some of the changes that were made in the Wild Rift specific rework. So that's just kind of how it is. We would like to at some point. It is likely that someone will do that work, but it is very likely that team will not be mine. It will be the champs team that will do investigation on Timo and potentially make changes to him because my team does not currently have the bandwidth to do that type of work. So sorry. But I'm just gonna skip over Timo questions in the future because I think I've probably spent too much time talking about Timo. Um, Man, my nose is really itchy. I don't know why. Sorry, I keep scratching my nose. Okay, let me get to the questions on this sheet here. Okay, do you think it would be beneficial to have more training wheels for new players, like the arrows that tell you which lane you're supposed to go in? Maybe in character selection phase, telling you if you're picking someone outside your role, if you don't have Smite as jungle, then if the game suggests pathing for jungler, or if you have performance, can suggest a link to official Wild Rift guide channels. Learn how to play X lane or Y character. I think lots of stuff like this would be helpful. There's an issue though, and there is actually a subset of designers that I believe are not fully allocated to stuff like this, but like there are designers that work on new player stuff, like new player intros. Um, uh, it's not my team, right? It's actually other people do this, but um, stuff like pathing for junglers is kind of dangerous because that requires a lot of upkeep. Because so right now, right? Let's suppose we're making this for Evelyn, and we're like, okay, Evelyn, you should start Krugs and go to red and then go to Raptors or whatever, right? It's like which is a good currently I don't know if it's the most optimal Evelyn path, but it's like a functional Evelyn path right now, right? It's like let's suppose we make some change in the future where that's no longer a good path, or it's like actively griefing to go for that path, or that path is just like in the bottom 50% of pathing. It's like, okay, well now we have to completely rework the system every time we change the jungle. Oh man, that's dangerous. That's a lot of upkeep, right? It's like we don't want systems that are massive upkeep. That can be dangerous because that just basically means that puts a lot of burden on my team to not make changes to those systems if we can avoid it. And that's like it's something we definitely want to avoid. But that being said, I think stuff that doesn't require a ton of upkeep, um, like potentially, I think the one that's most valuable, I think here is like, and I don't know how difficult this would be, but I think this is something that we definitely would want to do if we could. Is like, hey, if you're jungle, it should probably give you smite. Like, I think that would be great. That's the kind of thing. Like, hey, if you have smite and you're not the jungler, it should probably say like, hey, are you sure you want to have smite? You're not the jungler. Um, that's the kind of thing that's like, it probably doesn't require much in the terms of upkeep. I don't know how hard it would be to do like right now, but my expectation is that um, that's the kind of like high value, probably not too much effort, but I'm not sure, right? It's like again, keep in mind I don't know much about how the client works at all, so I'm not sure how difficult that would be. Um, but that's the kind of thing in this area that I think would be very high value for us because it wouldn't really require any upkeep, right? Like, that just is the way it is, right? Um, I spent some time working on or like talking about why 3.0 was a small patch in my previous stream. But basically, it was a combination of a bunch of factors. One of the big ones was winter break. One of the other big ones was that some things got pushed out of 3.0 and then put into 3.1 because they were not ready in time, partially due to the winter break, partially due to some errors on our part internally. Like there were some QA issues that could not be resolved in time. Some things got delayed. I can't really talk about what that is. Maybe when 3.1 comes out, if the content's in there, I can talk a little bit about that. But the original plan for 3.0 was not for 3.0 to have such a small amount of content. Like like in terms of gameplay. Um, I can't really talk about why exactly that is, like getting into specifics. Like maybe in like 6 months I can tell you because at that point probably all the content will be released. Um, but basically there were plans for more stuff. It didn't make it in. Yeah, the competitive season starting soon also has some impact, but we were planning on doing stuff that we didn't expect to have like huge impact on competitive. But yes, even with that, we were not planning on like upending the entire meta or anything like that. So that was definitely a small factor, not a huge factor, but a small one. Why Winter's Approach isn't popular on Wild Rift? Can you make it like the PC version? I talked about this a little bit earlier. I prefer the PC version. I think we should do it in Wild Rift, but no word on like whether we are or are not going to do that. But that's my personal opinion: is we should do the PC version. Okay. Why don't more Wild Rift devs talk to the content creators slash the community? I'm sure lots of people already know the answer to this question. This is a question I'm sure that many people already know, right? If you follow like Riot Juno on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen a lot of this. It's like I can tell you for a fact, a lot of the reason why many people don't interact with the community that I work with is because they have tried to interact with the community and they have just gotten immense negative backlash for this, right? It's like I can tell you when I started streaming to 8 people, things were awesome. When my stream got popular after the last one, I have in the time period since my last stream where I had like 40-ish average viewers or something like that, and my stream got because my stream got posted to Reddit. I have received multiple death threats in my Twitter DMs. I've been told to kill myself, I think like 3 or 4 times in my Twitter DMs. I have gotten some like unbelievably like just like not even necessarily like physical threats or like stuff like that in my DMs, but just like really negative stuff like telling me to like that I should be fired, etc. Really really negative stuff, right? And it's like it, I don't blame any of the people I work with for not wanting to deal with that, right? It's like not everybody's going to have the stomach for it. Like and I'll say, like I said earlier on the stream, my stream has been really positive. Like if I didn't have a Twitter account, well, first of all, no one would know that I streamed. But if I didn't have a Twitter account, my experience interacting with the community would actually have been pretty positive. Like I guess on Reddit, I've gotten some people flaming me as well, like some people sending to some pretty bad stuff to my DMs. But the truth here is like I have also had some really positive interactions. I've had some really awesome interactions with a variety of different people. And for me, that's worth it, right? I can handle the negativity, but many people can't, and I do not blame them at all. Like I don't. I really don't. Um, so it's unfortunate, right? It's like it's just kind of an unfortunate circumstance, a set of circumstances, and it's like I understand why they don't do it. So um, yeah, uh, I think the summary answer here is like many people have tried to talk, like Wild Rift devs have tried talking to the community, and they've been really burned, and that kind of makes them go back to lurking. That's kind of it. That being said, I will say a lot of the Wild Rift devs, probably more than you realize, do spend a lot of time talking to people. Like Roguefool, for example, he has these like crazy long conversations with people in his DMs that are like way beyond what I could ever keep up with. Just using him as an example. So it's people probably the Wild Rift devs are probably a little bit more active in the community than you might think, but they're just a little more low key than maybe some of the other Riot devs because it can get pretty bad if you are not low key. Anyway, um, would you or other devs be willing to do podcasts? As I mentioned before, I would love to do a podcast. I would have to get it approved by Draggles probably. I'd assume he'd probably be fine with it, but I'd have to make sure. But yeah, I would love to do stuff like that. I love talking about Wild Rift. I love talking to people. So yeah, like send me a DM on Twitter and I can talk to Ben and we can see what we can set up. So let's have a conversation. Um, so why don't inhibs? So let me get back to the actual stream questions here. And sorry for being like kind of a downer on the stream, but like I wanted to answer the question. It's like this is something I wanted to be really clear about. Like um, I don't I don't flame my teammates for not interacting because I think they're totally right not to, right? Like I don't blame them. Um, So, why don't inhibs respawn in Wild Rift? There's a bunch of reasons. Mostly this has to do with game pacing. And that's another good question. So, what about a podcast with a member of every team you have, you from System and Balance or someone from Champs? I have talked about having Roguefool on my stream before, and in fact, I was talking about this earlier on the stream. I had intended to have him on stream when we did the patch where we released Seedjar and Mega Drive because he made those items when he was still on my team, and then he moved to Champs. Um, I had intended to have him here to talk about the items, and then I didn't realize the patch was coming out a day before. Oh, hey, it's Mike. So that's Rogue Fool right there. Yeah, so I had intended to have him on the stream. And if people really want to talk to someone from Champs, I would be happy to have Rogue Fool here to talk about stuff. If that's something people really want, I would love to have him here, and we can talk about whatever people want. So anyway, yeah, it was originally planned. We were originally talking about having him on to talk about Hextech Mega Drive and Seed Jar, but like I said, I did not realize the patch came out a day before I thought, and so I was like scrambling to do um, the review so that it would be out on the same day that the patch came out, and then that ended up in obviously not having someone else there because I didn't plan ahead of time. So that's it. So, whew, alrighty. Let me get back to the questions in the doc. Hopefully, I can make it through these questions. I want to at least get through this page before I move back to chat a little bit. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. Uh, why don't inhibs respawn in Wild Rift? So I was talking a little bit about this. Basically, it's a bunch of reasons. One of the big ones is game pacing. One of them is that we want game ending to be more inevitable in Wild Rift than it is in PC, right? It's like, so if you think of, I wish I could. So like if you think of games as like a distribution, right? It's like if this set of dotted lines is the distribution of games, and in PC these are like even, right, over these this games. It's like in Wild Rift, we actually want to like do something like this, where like, hey, maybe there are some games in here um, that go a long time, but we'd rather not have games that go super long. And so we'd like the distribution to be more something like this, where most of the games are in the middle and we don't have as many extremes. Um, and inhibs respawning would kind of run pretty significantly counter to that. Hopefully, this is probably like the worst diagram I've ever made, which is mostly because I don't want to change my scene, because I'm an incompetent streamer, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Um, but yeah, basically it's because we want to avoid games going too long, and because we uh, want to what's it called? It looks like this. Yeah, sorry, I don't know. That's probably the worst. I would need like Notepad up or something like that, but I can't because I set this scene to this browser tab. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it. Anyway, basically, it's to keep the distribution of games smaller. Like maybe I'll do it with my hands. I don't know. So like imagine in League PC you have an even distribution of all these games over like this long bar. It's like we want to compress the distribution of games because it's a mobile game and we want to make sure games end in a reasonable amount of time. So do inhib respawns actually dramatically increase game time? I feel like it could decrease it sometimes. In rare cases, yes, it will decrease the game time of certain games, but on average, inhib respawning would be a mechanic that would add to game time. Yes, on average. That was understandable. Well, okay, thank you. I'm glad that someone could get it. Anyway, that's the reason why they don't. This is not to say that we could never do some kind of respawning inhib or something like that. Um, but the truth is just that it kind of runs counter to some of our goals. So if we had a good reason to make one, like if we say wanted to, increase variability of game time, if we did want to do that, inhibs would be a good solution. But that's not currently what we're looking for. So that's kind of why we don't. Hello, I don't know if you already answered this, but IMO, once you lose all inhibs, you already lost since you always have to allot two people to defend. I know you guys want short matches, but I think there are other ways for this to happen. Yes, losing all inhibs is supposed to be kind of a death blow, right? It's like supposed to be a win condition. It is possible this is a win condition that feels really bad, and that maybe we should come up with a different way to like for players to make a good death blow. Um, but it is intended by like that is a design of the system is that hey, if you lose all three inhibs, you probably can't win the game, right? It's like that's just how it is. Like we have to make certain things in the game death blows or the games won't end. So I think that the more criticism here is like, hey, this is a really bad feeling way of ending the game. Is there data that shows what percent win rate is when you lose all nibs? Yes, we have data on that. Yes, I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but we do have the data on that. Um, uh, I've won two matches with all inhibs down, but like at that point, don't you deserve to lose? Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a really small percentage chance of coming back, and it's a significant advantage to the winning team, right? It's like win condition for them to play around. I think the bigger problem statement here, which I kind of agree with, is like this is a really bad feeling way to lose the game where you just get like constantly pressured out by minions. I kind of wish that there was like something more narrowed and focused where it was like losing an inhib deals a significant chunk of damage to your nexus, and maybe each one is like 30%. So hey, if you take an inhib tower, instead of doubling your super minion spawns, it just like caps your nexus HP at like 10% or something like that. Right? It's like let's suppose this is just super off the wall pitch, right? It's like I'm not saying that this is something that we would ever do, but like let's say every time you lose an inhib tower, your nexus gets its HP capped at like 30% less or whatever, right? It's like um, that's like another version of the mechanic. It's like, yeah, and it might be terrible, right? It's like I'm not saying this is a good version. It's like, but that's just like an alternative version of the system that it could look like. And there's obviously not an easy solution that would feel better for both sides, right? It's like, so I can't tell you that there's like, if there was an easy solution that feels better for both sides, we would already have that in the game, right? So it's like basically this way is functional. It does what it's intended to do. It may not feel great, but that's a separate problem. Yeah, that's like a fair point, right? Call me Tog. It's like, if you have three enemy inhibs down and the enemy isn't a significant disadvantage, what's the point, right? It's like that's fair. It's like that's kind of the point, right? Like that's what the mechanic is supposed to do. 3.0 version is a big update except for two champions. There's no newer. Why not call 2.7? The update is not as good as 2.6. Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit in my previous stream, but I think our patch naming convention, we either should have number one, message to players saying 3.0 would not be a big update, or we should change our patch naming convention. One of the two. I think it was kind of a mistake to like not message players and be like, look, by the way, 3.0 doesn't have a ton of gameplay content in it, because the patch naming convention is just done by like years and content patches, right? It's like it's a new year, therefore it's 3.0, because the last year was the two patches, and the year before that was one patches, right? So it's like that's just kind of the naming convention. But I think the naming convention is maybe not ideal for my team in particular. So if people understand if they come from PC League, they might. I mean, I think overall though, like just because you understand because you've seen the system before doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't be improved, right? It's like I think that's totally fair. Is that yeah, in PC the like the initial patch of every year where it's like 11.0 or whatever is usually not that big of a patch, but at the same time doesn't mean it couldn't be an improved system. So that's sort of like the short answer is like I think ideally we would have done something a little differently. We're used to 3.0 slash point 4.0 being a big update. Yeah, it's totally fair. Okay, so I think this is pretty much all the real questions. I had some people message me some like random stuff. What other games do I play besides Wild Rift? I play a lot of other games. Recently, I've been playing like Vampire Survivor, or is it Vampire Survivor or Vampire Survivors? I don't actually know. I've played a decent amount of FF14 recently. I'm gonna get back into Path of Exile soon. I play some PC League soon. I play some PC League occasionally. Um, I've played a lot of Risk of Rain 2 recently. I play a lot of games. I don't know. I've been thinking about playing Final Fantasy 5. Um, yeah, it's a great game for $3. Absolutely, yeah, it is a great game for $3, for sure. Rust. I have about 100 hours of total in Rust, but I have not played Rust in many years. I played about 100 hours of Wild Rift. Is it what says besides Wild Rift? I play a good amount of Wild Rift for sure. We got to get some Risk of Rain 2 games in the DLC drops. Absolutely, for sure. Yes, Risk of Rain 2 in there. Love that game. But yeah, I do like to be specific here. I do play a lot of Wild Rift. I try and play at like so. I mentioned how we playtest every day. We have an hour slot every day work during work hours. So that's usually two games, sometimes one if something goes wrong. That's usually two games a day just in playtests. And in general, uh, I try to play at least a couple games of Wild Rift every day if I can. I don't hit that goal every day, but most days I get 2 to 3 games in. So do you play Dance Dance Revolution? You seem like you got the moves for it. I definitely don't have the moves for DDR. I'm not coordinated enough for that. Only my hands have this skill. My feet are lacking in the skill. Um, he's pro, just modest. Yeah, that's right. What champions play in Wild Rift? So I in Wild Rift I usually play. So there's like a difference between champions that I enjoy and the champions that I'm actually good at. I would say my most successful champions are like Thresh and Nami in support. The champions I like playing the most are TF and Jarvan. I like Jarvan. I like TF a lot, but I've not been as successful with them as I have been with Thresh, for sure. So, um, and recently I've been playing a lot of Kai'Sa. In fact, I was watching Stuart's stream to get, to download the Kai'Sa build. Also because I was working on Kai'Sa's rec build items, which currently are not very good. Um, so, what role is played amongst your team the most? We all play different roles. So, uh, I would say the most contested role in our playtests, which is the whole of in-game for playtests. Uh, the whole of in-game for playtests, the most contested role I think is actually support, maybe jungle, but I'm not sure. But yeah, the evolved thing is definitely complicated. Um, anyway, to get to one of the earlier questions, do you prefer PC League or Wild Rift? I actually prefer playing Wild Rift these days. I still play a little bit of League PC because I have lots of friends that play PC League still, and sometimes they'll invite me to play a game and I'll go play it. But I actually like there was like when I first joined Wild Rift, I still definitely liked PC League more, but there was a definite moment when I started enjoying Wild Rift more, which I can tell you exactly what it was. I went to the airport. All right, I went to the airport and I was like, "Damn, I'm here so early. I'm so early and I can't do anything." And then I pulled out my phone and I was like, "Oh my God, I can play Wild Rift right now. This is so hype." And ever since then, I've just been like, I play Wild Rift when I walk around. I play Wild Rift when I'm sitting at my desk. I play Wild Rift in my bed. It's awesome. It's sick. I love Wild Rift. It's so good. It's just yeah. It's like it's 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 so fun being able to just play Wild Rift whenever, wherever. And like this didn't occur like this didn't hit me initially like when I first started playing a lot of Wild Rift, but the more I've played it, the more it's like kind of felt like PC games feel too long, and I feel so restricted by like having to sit at my desk. I just feel like I don't know. I mean I still like PC League, to be clear. So I'm not hating on the game. The game's great, but um there's definitely toilet to challenger. Yeah, there's just definitely something really freeing about being able to play the game on the phone. Um, for sure. So yeah, so that's actually all. I've actually gotten through all the questions in here, which is awesome. I'm really happy I was able to do that. Although it did take me 3.5 hours. I guess I was answering a lot of questions from chat. So here's the deal I'll make. How can questions be submitted? So I took all these questions from Twitter, from my Twitter DMs, from podcasts, and from Reddit. And I also got some questions from Alice, who put some of these questions in here. To be clear, I did not get all of these. So thanks, Alice. I'm probably not. I don't think I'm gonna like. If people really want me to do another stream like this, I will. But I didn't think there'd be more questions in this nature, or at least not enough to be worth doing. But maybe. Do champ success rates differ between regions? Would one champ require a nerf in NA but a buff in Korea? Champ win rates and success rates in general do differ slightly, but it's mostly perception that differs between regions. There's some instances we've seen where there's like large gaps between regions, which we're still investigating, but it's pretty rare. In most cases, it's perception differences. So, for example, if you go back like 3 months, there was this perception in Korea that Font of Life was really overpowered. Let me tell you a secret. That was true. Font of Life was really overpowered. And we had been talking about nerfing it for a while. I had been arguing that we should nerf it. But basically, the counter argument was like, look, no one's playing it. And if we nerf it, players are going to be really confused. And also, it's not that overpowered. It's just a little bit overpowered. Um, so we ended up, like, when we discovered that, like, when we were going through sentiment data and we discovered, hey, look, everyone in Korea thinks Font of Life is really OP, we were like, awesome, let's nerf it. It's OP. We know it's OP, and these players know it's OP. We should validate them. It's no longer OP, but that was a good example of like sentiment being very different because I didn't see that sentiment anywhere else in any other region. But the Korea sentiment data was like, look, it's OP, and they were totally correct, right? Like they were 100% right. Um, so thank you so much for your time. Oh, yeah. So what I was going to say before I got into answering other questions, I'm going to give it. I will give it 4 hour stream. So I'll stay another half hour if people have other questions, and then I will just call it. I'm just going to straight call it at 3 p.m. So roughly. When are you going to start streaming Wild Rift? Have you seen me talking with my hands? Like, have you seen this? You know, how would I play Wild Rift on stream? My hands would have to be playing the game. I wouldn't even be able to talk. Um, Can you share your thoughts about Wild Rift balance in comparison to PC LoL? Is Riot more likely to see PC LoL's mistake and try not to bring them into Wild Rift? There's definitely some amount of learning. Like there's certainly a lot of learnings we can take from PC for sure. I don't know how much of it is like repeated mistakes or like whatever. It's like there are some things that aren't the same between the games though for sure. So there are some different problems that pop up for sure. Um, as far as balance in comparison to PC, um, it's tough because we don't have the public API. We're also a much newer game. There's a lot of different things to consider. Something to realize is that people think of PC's balance as this like eternal thing that has never changed, that they've always done the same. PC's balance has changed a lot over the years. If you look at balancing in season 2 and season 3, let me tell you a secret. In season 2 and season 3, Rumble was like 60% win rate in solo queue. Like actually, if you picked Rumble, you were just going to win most of your games. Like even if you were terrible, right? We don't do that in Wild Rift, and the ecosystem is like way less Wild Westy than old style like early days PC League of Legends. And so there's some like really significant differences, and we're never going to treat the game like that where we just like disrespect the players by like allowing a like ludicrously overpowered champion to just roam because no one thinks they're overpowered. Um, so like there's some pretty significant differences, and we're gonna pay attention on all that stuff. My last question, I think this falls under balance changes a while ago. Use buff as buff how much gold players with smite get equipped get from jungle monsters enough the jungle camp respawn times. Do you think this has achieved what you wanted? Yes, it did achieve what we wanted. It did not go far enough, and we've been discussing what we should do to continue further along, going further along these goals. Basically, the goal for that change was, hey, there should probably be less poaching. There should probably be a little bit more ganks and a little bit less power farming. And